to the Wild Wisdom Podcast with Dr. Patricia Mills. I'm Dr. Patricia. This podcast is for people who want to transform their health, restore their hormones, and reconnect to their body's natural wisdom. Hi, I'm Dr. Patricia. I'm a Canadian medical doctor, published author, internationally recognized researcher, and passionate advocate for your health. Here, we'll explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science, distilling the essence of true health into practical steps you can take. Wild wisdom is instinctive knowledge in action. Thanks for making this part of your day. The important thing to know about balancing hormones, because what people are starting to realize is that a lot of chronic disease is as a result of imbalanced hormones. Now, what are hormones? Hormones are the messengers that that float inside of our body. So they're produced by glands in the body that make the hormones and release them into the blood. And then those hormones travel through the blood and then connect, kind of like a key with a lock, to receptors on the cells. So your cells are what make up the organs in your body. So every organ is a community of cells sort of living together, stuck to each other. Like, for example, there's the liver organ, there's the pancreas organ, there's the ovaries and the testes. And on each cell, there's a number of receptors, and receptors are like the locks, okay? And to activate a receptor, you need a specific key, and hormones are like keys that attach to these locks or receptors and activate something happening inside the cell. So, for example, the hormone insulin basically activates the ability of the cell to open up to sugar in the blood. So you have sugar in the blood, the receptor opens up like a door, and the sugar rushes into the cell, and then the cell can use the sugar for energy. And each hormone has its own unique consequences, like effects on function in the body. So just as a very high-level overview, because each hormone has a lot of different functions. Like insulin doesn't just control blood sugar, but that's, what is very well known for. Other hormones are estrogen, which you can think of as like your va-va-voom hormone in women's. It's like it causes the curvaceousness, the full lips, the breasts, the hips. And it's a growth hormone. It helps the lining of the uterus grow. However, it can also, in its sort of dark side, help other things grow, like cancer, fibroids, that kind of thing. Testosterone, on the other hand, is like your libido and muscle mass hormone. And it's kind of famous as the male hormone, but actually women need testosterone. It's just in different levels and a different balance with other hormones. But women who lack enough testosterone really have issues with their libido and maintaining good muscle mass. Another hormone that you should be aware of is progesterone, which is our chill, feel-good hormone. So it changes in its level naturally throughout the month. So some parts of the month, this is for women specifically that I'm speaking about now, at some times of the month, you have higher levels of progesterone, and that's usually after you ovulate. Your egg is released from its follicle, and what's left behind on the ovary starts to pump out progesterone. And if you have enough progesterone, that's the time before you menstruate, right? Like the 2 weeks or so before you menstruate. If you have enough progesterone, you're like feeling good during that time. But if you start to not have enough progesterone, you start getting into premenstrual syndrome, feeling low, irritable, kind of depressed feeling. That can be very, very horrible for some women who experience it to varying degrees. Some people experience it very, very badly. I had that myself for a while, and it was terrible. And then if you don't have enough hormone, progesterone going into a pregnancy, you will either not be able to get pregnant because you need progesterone to support the initiation of pregnancy. And then you also need enough progesterone to stay pregnant for the first 3 months or so. I mean, you need enough progesterone to support a healthy pregnancy period, but particularly in those first 3 months. And then the other time you need enough progesterone is when you're breastfeeding, okay? But it's a chill hormone, right? So you kind of want to have it around in at least a certain minimum amount throughout your life. And in menopause, when you go through menopause, what happens is that your ovaries retire and your adrenal glands take over the job of producing these hormones. The adrenal glands is capable of producing estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. Its main job is to produce cortisol and other hormones like adrenaline, for example. And so if you have, your adrenal glands are producing cortisol, you want to make sure that they're producing not too much or not too little as well, because it's a hormone of stress. You want enough hormone to cope with stress, but not so much that you enter into what's called like a chronic stress state, which is very unhealthy for the body. Because remember, these hormones are messengers that initiate certain like chemical cascades of function inside your cells. And you want to have the right function being triggered at the right time in the right amount. So hormones are really fascinating. And the other thing to understand is that hormones are like, if you think about kids in the playground holding hands and running around a circle, like playing like Ring Around the Rosie, for example, they are connected in that way, in the sense that if one hormone starts to fall down, so to speak, or like lose its balance, it will eventually affect the other hormones. Okay. And to what extent that happens and which one gets imbalanced first or which one gets imbalanced more, that seems to be a more individual thing. Like some people will tend to go into what's called estrogen dominant states, which medical doctors don't like that term, but really what it means is that you have more estrogen relative to other hormones than you should. Okay, it doesn't mean you have estrogen that's too high. You could have very low estrogen, but the other hormones that balance it out could be lower, like progesterone being too low, for example. And so there's this intricate kind of connection between all these hormones where if one becomes imbalanced, the other ones will eventually become imbalanced. And because these are the messengers of your body, you can imagine that this would eventually affect potentially all bodily functions, which can be very, very difficult for a medical doctor to deal with when they have a patient who comes in, let's say, and it doesn't matter the age. This could be a woman in her like 20s. This person comes in and they're saying, I'm just not feeling great. I've got like low energy and my hair is starting to thin out. I'm starting to lose my eyebrows are starting to get a little bit sparse, like on the outer third. I am having problems maintaining my ideal weight. I'm really irritable. I'm starting to get anxious and depressed, or I'm having horrible periods, or they're coming too quickly or too slowly, too heavily or too light, too painfully, or I'm going through menopause, like in perimenopause, and I am suffering. Or I'm in menopause, but these are not my golden years. I'm just like, I've lost my libido. And that libido loss can happen at a much younger age, by the way. So, and that all comes down to hormonal imbalance. I mean, there are other ways to reach those states of experience. Like you could, for example, have fatigue because you have not enough of certain nutrients or too many of other nutrients, or some kind of toxicity from an environmental heavy metal, or let's say a mold exposure, an infection that you acquired, like a parasite, a microbiome, gut microbiome imbalance. There's many different ways to get there. My opinion, and a lot of doctors who are in this kind of space of root cause medicine would agree, is that oftentimes there is at least a small to large element of hormonal imbalance. And the question is, how do we get to this state? So I'm going to start off talking about a very, very common way that people living in today's modern society and modern culture and way of eating and drinking are imbalancing their hormones. And that way is through blood sugar balance. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast, Wild Wisdom with Dr. Patricia Mills. If you like this podcast, please take the time to like and subscribe, and please feel free to leave any comments and look below for the contact information if you want to connect with me directly. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, or night.
Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast is not a substitute for a professional care doctor or other qualified medical professional. This podcast is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you are looking for help in your journey, it is important that you seek out a qualified health practitioner. If you would like to work with Dr. Patricia for her expert health transformation guidance, please email her at info@drpatriciamills.com to book a discovery call. You can also find Dr. Patricia on Instagram at Dr. Patricia Mills and Facebook at Wild Wisdom for Women with Dr. Patricia Mills MD. For access to all of Dr. Patricia's educational videos and more amazing perks, consider becoming a Patreon member. Links are in the description of this episode. It is important to have an expert in your corner that can help you make the changes you crave, especially when it comes to your health.